Welcome back. Let's cut through the CMMC noise.
All right, so today we're jumping into this really sharp white paper called Streamlined Compliance Architecture, a systems engineering approach to CMMC certification. Now that's a mouthful, but it tackles a massive problem in the defense world. Why are so many companies failing their cybersecurity audits? Let's start by looking at just how big this problem really is.
Let's kick things off with a number that should honestly stop you in your tracks. 87%. Yeah. According to industry analysis, an absolutely staggering 87% of defense contractors fail to meet even the most basic cybersecurity requirements. They think they're compliant, they report that they're compliant, but when an actual assessor shows up at the door, the whole thing just falls apart.
So the big question is, why? You know, the usual excuses. Not enough budget, we don't have the right fancy tools, we can't find enough experts. They just don't tell the whole story. The paper argues that the real reason is way more fundamental. It's a massive gap between how companies see compliance and what it actually is. And this gets us to the absolute core of the problem, what the white paper calls CMMC's hidden architecture. The whole argument is that most companies are looking at compliance completely wrong. They see a simple checklist when in reality, it's something else entirely. The problem really boils down to these two totally different views. On one side, you have the illusion. CMMC is presented as this flat, alphabetical list of 110 things to do. Access control is first, just because A comes before C. This makes you think you can just hand them out to your team and tackle them in any old order. But the reality, on the other side, is that CMMC is a layered hierarchy. Some controls are the foundation that everything else is built on. You have to do them first.
So here it is, the hidden architecture laid bare. It turns out CMMC, that's the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, is really structured like a 6-layer pyramid. You have to start at the bottom at layer 0 with governance, defining the rules of the game. Then you can build up to layer 1, identity, which figures out who is on your network. Only then can you move up to layer 2 and control what they can access. Trying to jump to layer 4, something like incident response, before you've even figured out who is who on your network, it's completely pointless.
You know, the best way to think about this is like building a house. It's just common sense, right? You would never, ever install a fancy alarm system before you've even built the walls. It's the exact same principle. You have to pour the concrete foundation of governance. Then you build the load-bearing walls of identity. Everything else depends on that structure being solid first. The checklist approach completely misses this logic.
Okay, so when organizations ignore this structure and just use a checklist, they fail. We know that. But how they fail is also widely misunderstood. The white paper breaks it down into 3 very distinct failure modes.
Now this is where things get really surprising. Look at where the failures are actually happening. Most people assume the problem is technical, right? That they didn't implement a control correctly. But that's only 15% of the failures. Look at that massive piece of the pie. 55% of failures are evidence failures. That means the company probably did the right thing, but they just couldn't prove it to an auditor.
So let's quickly define what we're talking about here. Scoping is getting the boundary wrong. You're either protecting too much stuff or, way more dangerously, you've missed something important. Implementation, well, that's the technical part, configuring the control. And then there's evidence, the big one. Having the logs, the screenshots, the paperwork to prove that you are doing what you say you're doing, and that you've been doing it for months.
And here's the absolute kicker. These failures aren't independent. They're a domino effect, a chain reaction. If you get your scoping wrong at the very beginning, your implementation is guaranteed to fail. If your implementation is wrong, it's literally impossible to generate the right evidence. This is so critical. You can't just fix your paperwork at the last minute if you forgot about an entire server back in the scoping phase. You have to go all the way back to the beginning and start over.
This quote from the paper just nails it. The biggest reason for failure isn't a tech problem. It's an organizational discipline problem. Let's be honest, engineers are great at flipping the switches and making the tech work. But capturing the proof, documenting the process, keeping that evidence organized over time, that's a totally different skill set. And it's exactly where most of these efforts completely fall apart.
So, after all that doom and gloom, how do we fix this mess? Well, the white paper proposes a really elegant systems engineering solution. It's called the Streamlined Compliance Architecture, or SCA.
At its heart, SCA is really a methodology designed to force organizations to see reality. It gets you to stop treating CMMC like a checklist and instead treat it as what it really is, a dependency graph.
a series of interconnected problems that absolutely must be solved in a specific order, respecting that six-layered pyramid we saw earlier.
And SCA introduces a couple of really brilliant innovations to tackle these problems head-on. First, for scoping, it reframes the problem. Instead of just listing assets, it tells you to treat sensitive data, what the government calls CUI, like a contaminant. The goal isn't just to see where it sits, but to map how it flows through your network and then build barriers to stop it from spreading. And second, there's this idea of twin stream evidence. This means for every single technical action you take, you do the evidence capture action at the exact same time. They become one task. This completely gets rid of that last-minute panicked scramble for proof right before the audit.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, the SCA workflow is a super clear six-phase approach. You start by just understanding your business. Then you define your data boundary using that contaminant model. Then, and this is crucial, you write your policies before you even think about buying new technology. Only then do you choose your architecture, build it with that twin stream evidence model, and finally, you verify that it all works. It's a logical, step-by-step blueprint that forces you to do things in the right order. And all of this really gets to the massive mindset shift that's required here. Success isn't about just checking off boxes. It's about having a detailed architectural blueprint and then building your compliance program with real engineering discipline, just like you were building a bridge or a skyscraper.
And this quote right here, this is the thesis of the entire white paper. For way too long, companies have looked at compliance as this painful, annoying administrative task to get through as cheaply as possible. The key takeaway is to completely reframe it. This is an engineering problem, and when you treat it like one, with structure and dependencies and validation, you can actually solve it.
So to sum it all up, the SCA proposition is basically this. First, you've got to see and respect the hidden hierarchy. Second, you have to address the failure modes, scoping, then implementation, then evidence in that cascade order. Third, integrate your evidence collection with your implementation right from day one. Fourth, understand the real costs of your decisions up front. And finally, you have to enforce that sequence. Stop building the roof before the foundation is poured.
And that leaves us with one final and I think really critical question to consider. Looking at your own organization's efforts, are you working off a simple to-do list, just kind of hoping for the best? Or are you building from a detailed, disciplined engineering blueprint? The answer to that question will probably determine whether you join the 87% who fail or the small few who actually succeed.
Thanks for watching. If this was useful, please subscribe for more.